Hello, welcome everyone back to the Wake and Body podcast. I'm excited to get into a chat today with Mike Tsirakidis. Welcome, Mike. We're going
Hello, how are
to,
you?
yeah, it's great to see you again, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And Mike and I met at the Granite Club when we were working in Toronto. I don't know if you're still there right now, but that's how we met. You were actually my one of my massage therapists at the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember us having some great chats and it's funny how we've kind of come back to connecting again because when I left the club, we disconnected for a while just because of geography and stuff. But
Right.
yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing a bit more of kind of what we vibe on when we chat together and stuff. So so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're an RMT, firefighter, and breathwork and sound therapy facilitator. So that's quite a resume there. I'm excited to
Right.
find out, like, especially when I saw you last, like when you treated me last, right? Like so much time has passed. We're talking like decades, right? So,
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up more. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is going way back when um when I started this domestic athlete, I was starting to engage more in social media simply because I thought I had to because of my business. Because I went from being employed for
Right.
so many years to like I don't to like having no network and no audience or anything,
Right.
right? So I was on
Right.
social media a lot and I noticed, interestingly enough, what I noticed a lot from your page was your photography, to be honest with you. And um
Yeah.
yeah, and I love your work and your style, and it appeared at the time I could be hallucinating or whatever, but I think at the time you're traveling a lot. It looked like you were traveling a lot at the time.
Yeah, it's always been a passion, and
Yeah,
people inspired me, and I saw
yeah,
friends of mine on social media traveling and taking
yeah,
photographs. So that really kind of prompted me to say, let me try this because the photos do look beautiful, right? And
yeah,
you really start discovering that planet Earth is a beautiful place and there's some
yeah,
beautiful destinations. So why don't you try to capture it as
yeah,
best as you can? I mean, there's different elements now like Photoshop and Lightroom that enhance the photo, but um yeah, it becomes you become like an artist. You're trying to capture the beauty of this place that you're in.
yeah, yeah,
So I dipped my toe into the photographic
yeah.
world, and I'm glad it inspired you. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is actually a great segue to going into like what inspired me to have you on as well is we just recently reconnected in person. I attended one of your well two of your breathwork um sessions in Toronto,
Hmm.
and to be honest with you, um and this is aligned with the theme. The theme of today, I think, was picking up when I was getting ready for the chat today was authentic life or authentic living, and that session brought me back to it. It was almost like a homecoming, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And today I'd like to celebrate that, authentic living
Hmm.
and explore deeper as far as what that really means and stuff, right? But the very first session I had an emotional release, which, for dudes, that doesn't happen very often. And I had an emotional release
It's
that was,
not.
yeah, it was right at the
We're
very
we're
end.
not. Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it was right at the very end. But what was weird about it or interesting about it was what came from inside of me felt very old and it felt very locked away for a really long
Mhm.
time. And it was a finally just like a last breath of like, whoa, like it just came out of me. And then I was good. And
Mhm.
then the second time uh I attended your session, it was a completely different experience. Like I had a
Right. Right.
completely, and it's aligned to the theme
Mm.
for today. Like I had an experience somewhere in the session where I had a vision of facilitating another one of my retreats, potentially having you there and other practitioners,
Hmm.
and I realized that part of, I guess part of what I'm excited and passionate about doing is bringing new people to these types of
Hmm.
experiences that are probably in their life sort of maybe frustrated, but also could be curious and wanting to just learn more about their bodies, their health, their life, what they're doing here. A lot of that
Right.
stuff just started flooding, into my cells in that second session. There was no tears or emotion at that time, just more excitement. So
Yeah,
you
that's it.
clear the
Honestly, it's a
space,
great
right?
segue. It's a great
Yeah,
segue for me to kind of dive into breath work and what it is. And I mean, you touched
yeah.
upon something where men, yeah, we're emotionally suppressed.
Hmm.
We've been taught to grow up to, not show emotion or, yeah, not cry. I grew up in, a strong European family where, I mean, I think I only saw my dad cry once, and it was at his sister's funeral.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that environment, we're just taught to suppress. And even as a firefighter, I mean, I work with a group of predominantly alpha males.
Hmm.
And again, we're put in a lot of different or difficult situations. We see a lot of stuff, but um, when I started, there wasn't really an avenue to talk about it. You just kind of put it away and maybe joke about it. Firefighters tend to have a very dark sense of humor. But meanwhile, there could be a lot of stuff really going on internally. And you also touched upon how feelings were just kind of, it felt like they were harbored for a long, long time.
Hmm.
And what I teach is what's called somatic breath work. And somatic comes from the Greek word soma, meaning body or tissue. So we could be storing these traumas, these traumas or stresses for a prolonged period of time, whether it be a day, a week, a month, or years. So that's the beauty of breath work, is that we get to kind of release all this. And
Yeah.
everything that you experienced in your first session is kind of what I experienced in my very first session, and that I was blown away. I had read about breath work in different books, and I tried doing it at my home, but I wasn't getting the results that people had really experienced. And then coincidentally, I was invited to a studio downtown by a friend of mine for a breathwork ceremony.
Hmm.
And it was 1 hour long, and the facilitator's name was Brandon Wong, and he took us through a journey. And I was blown away. I was, taken to this feel good state. Everybody talks about the present moment and oneness and a sense of euphoria or sense of joy or happiness. And that's what I was brought to. I was just brought to this stillness. And I was like, I don't ever want to come out of this
Yeah.
space because it feels so good, right?
Yeah.
So I immediately joined that studio. I was going on a regular basis as many times as that class was offered. And then that's when the light bulb moment started coming on, saying, maybe I should start incorporating this to my massage therapy clients.
Hmm.
And it started becoming full circle of, it sounds like such a cliche, but mind, body, and spirit.
Hmm.
And I was connecting all these dots, and I'm a pretty introverted guy. I never would have suspected that I'd be teaching classes.
Hmm.
Yes, I still do work at the Granite Club as a massage therapist, but
Hmm.
now I'm teaching breathwork classes there. They
Yeah.
were open to it, and never did I think I would be teaching a class, and now I'm teaching them from home.
Hmm.
So but yeah, it's a powerful experience, and people are getting the same results that I had. So it's nice to hear and see people having the same experiences.
Yeah, and I feel too like in your space that you facilitate from at your home, when we come
Hmm.
in, for one, it doesn't even like it doesn't even seem like it's like a residence, right? Like you really
Right,
set it up in a really cool
right,
way with your big your instruments and the gong and the backdrop of the city. Like there's a whole vibe, amazing vibe to it. But
right.
also, um, that's also part of the experience. Like we're doing the breath work, but also you're incorporating the sound. It sounds like you're intuitively channeling what you're saying in the session, like you get into a zone and then it just kind of flows through you. But also I feel like it's a complete immersion. You're not only you're processing something from the inside out, but also it's
Yeah.
like the whole environment is giving you this big hug and holding the space for you at the same time, right? And I think that's where I started thinking about people need to experience it. If they don't even know this exists, they need to experience this. I like what I say,
Mm.
like this homecoming, this returning to yourself,
To home,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
to your sense of source. And
yeah,
well, thank you for saying that. But I mean, creating an environment is extremely important. You want the person to feel as comfortable as possible because you're going to go deep within and you're going to process maybe some unprocessed trauma that might come up. And
yeah,
so you want to be able to create a setting that they're comfortable enough to do that, or a safe environment. So I was taught by someone really, really on point, or he had his finger on the pulse as far as creating environments. So I learned a lot from him, and his name is Eddie Tony. And yeah, so creating an environment is extremely important. I try my best to do that. So I'm
mhm,
glad you sense that right away. And the feedback so far has been, yeah, they most people feel a sense of safety or a sense of calmness when they walk into my space.
yeah. And when I think about living authentically or facilitating or practicing authentically, what's cool about that is it creates room for you to use all of your superpowers. So even when you post online, you post a promotion, could tell your photography's in there. Like you
Yeah,
can in your intro at the beginning, knowing that you're a first responder and you deal with situations where you know there's a huge more awareness now amongst emergency first responders, fire, police, paramedics, that PTSD, mental health challenges and stuff like that with the job. So you're up close and front
personal.
with personal with these types of situations, and now you have tools as well to help your own clearing, but perhaps clearing of others, but also just like your knowledge of of the body and physiology through RMT, and like there's such a complete arsenal
Yeah.
of of tools there
Yeah,
to
and that's where
help,
it's
right?
coming full circle. Like I even
Yeah.
remember talking to a colleague of mine who is also a massage therapist, and she had read some case studies where she knew I was an emergency worker, and the case studies were showing that whenever we arrive on scene as emergency workers and I'm taking a person's blood pressure, I'm checking their pulse, I'm checking their breathing, I'm asking them, a lot of questions. And what the results were showing was that it's actually making that person worse. It's actually I'm in their face, I'm in their personal experience. They just had a traumatic experience, and all I'm
Yeah.
doing is kind of probing them. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's not personal at all.
Yeah.
So instead of being more human, putting my hand on their back, trying to calm them down, talking to them person to person, and just explain, hey, you just been in a pretty significant accident or incident.
Hmm.
I'm here to help, and just be like a person to them. Um, having more of a personal effect, or like you said, being more authentic,
Yeah.
really tries to calm that person down, or it does calm that person down instead of doing that medical model that we're kind
Yeah.
of taught. So in a lot of my emergency responses that I go to, I definitely incorporating being just an authentic person to this individual
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of just kind of probing them, because it's the studies show that it's making them probably worse. Now, will the department change this at times? Yeah, they might incorporate new policies,
Mhm.
but it's definitely something to have a discussion about.
Yeah, there's definitely a culture, and you might even be able to speak to that. There is potentially even a different culture between those main three professions of medic, police, and fire, that in how they embrace or not embrace that aspect of the job, right? I've had some
Right.
deep conversations with multiple paramedics that there's a real challenge in penetrating an
Mm,
old school culture. And
right.
numerous times friends of mine that are also paramedics all either taking a permanent leave or at least an
Mm,
extended leave because of this. It's just really interesting, and you hear the stories too of the person actually being cared for in an emergency situation. Usually what they recall sharing as far as the positive experiences, um, the police officer held my hand, the sound of the voice of the person calling me back, telling me not to fall asleep, or like that encouragement, that the love coming from that other human was the thing they
it's a
remembered,
human
not their blood
experience.
pressure.
Yeah. Right, right. Exactly. So it's just incorporate these small things. I'm amazed that they really don't teach that, and I don't think they
Yeah,
teach it to doctors as well. I remember a movie years ago with Robin Williams. I can't remember the name of it, but he was
Patch
like
Adams.
a comedian with them.
Yeah, Patch
Yeah,
Adams.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
that's right. So, and there was a lot more results when he was just human to human instead of being
yeah.
this medical model figure. So yeah, you know, I think it's important to embrace or incorporate these human experiences, or just a heart-to-heart connection with the people that you come into contact with, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, I noticed it too when I was doing predominantly, in the probably the first half of my career, doing predominantly personal training in a gym setting, delivering workout experiences and stuff. Um, Over time, you start to become aware of the nuance that's happening between you and the client that is not necessarily anything you studied in school. And I started learning what sent me on my journey of becoming more of a holistic coach and incorporating energy
mm,
work and lifestyle design and spiritual work to it is I realized that just delivering a workout is potentially could be just one dimensional, right? Like or
mhm,
very few level dimensional, right?
right.
There it comes down to like, if you just look at the PT and the programming side of it, there's someone that can come in with a template and just follow, I guess, the logical approach of delivering a leg workout versus, you know, intuitively tapping into the client before they come in, knowing that it's leg day, but also how do I deliver a leg workout that aligns with this person's experience right now in their day, in their situation, what's going on in their life, what's
And Brian,
valuable, right?
that's exactly how I handle the breathwork ceremonies that I host. You're
Yeah,
tapping into this energetic realm of the room
yeah,
and giving the clients, or the participants, exactly what they need in that moment. So it's a skill. Every time you do it over and over and over again, you get better at it. You get better at reading the energy of the room. And I never used to. I mean, here in North America, we don't really look at things on an energetic plane. We look at them more as a material plane. But the more and more I do this work, I'm realizing that the energetic plane is the more important plane to pay attention to.
yeah,
So, and the proof is in the pudding. The people are getting the results, and I think that speaks loudest. Is I'll try stuff on myself. I'll try stuff on clients and see what works, what doesn't work. And but for the most part, it's yeah, you're reading the energy of the room.
yeah. And we would both sort of understand it from both of our, both treatment and training perspective that you know, a muscle like injury or a knot or something that you can tangibly touch, right? Is it's really the it's really the outcome of an energetic
Hmm.
process, a spiritual and emotional experience that's coming in through the body, through their human, spiritual experience on earth or whatever. I always say left unchecked, it slows down. Like the energy in that space slows down and slows down and slows down to becomes a solid sort of muscle like cramp or muscle, inflammation or something, right? Also shows up in the
Right,
organs. A digestive ailment is comes from an energetic space first, and how we interact with it, how our mindset or program that we're running at the time, that or that's running us, engages with that
right,
experience. And I would say giving us the opportunity to access the lesson through our
right,
body, right? And then it's up
right.
to us to decide to love ourselves enough or be curious enough or whatever to get the massage therapy and do the self-care or whatever, to again, for the homecoming, the return home.
And what I've
Right?
experienced is that you can always change that energy. Energy is
Yeah.
energy, but you can always just change it. If it's kind of like a dense or heavy energy, you can change it to a lighter, less dense frequency. So that's kind of what it all boils down to, is that you have the power to change that energy, and then when you change that energy, you change matter. So there's a lot of doctors or speakers that I listen to that talk directly about that. And one of the guys that I really like is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm a
Yeah.
big science guy, and I need the science to kind of almost validate what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
he gives a lot of scientific data of the experiments that he's conducting, that we can see what's happening on an internal level, like brain scans, or our enzymes being produced, our proteins being produced, are we vasodilating? Like, there's a lot of statistical data that we can see now. And yeah, when you change the energy, you change matter. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to slide into there. A question that was coming up for me for you as well, as like we're all on a journey here, in this life form, this one particular life, and going through things, and there's times where we hit, I always say, like there's times where we reach the edge of the jungle, right? And
Mm,
and the decision we make is when we step into the jungle, into the unknown, and almost like there's no real looking back. There's just standing there and waiting till you're ready or doing what you need to get ready to go into the jungle. And as a coach,
mm.
I live to go into the jungle with you. I live to be
Okay,
your
right.
support, right? So, my question to you would be: is there a time in your journey, in your process, either before fire or RMT, or is there a time in your journey that you approached the jungle where you're like, something new
Yeah,
has to happen,
yeah.
something has to change? Like, what was happening in your life at the time, and how did that play out? How did you find your way?
So I don't know what it was, Brian, but something just drew me to this spiritual quest, if you will.
Hmm.
And I grew up in a predominantly Greek Orthodox family. I went to a Catholic high school, but I was drawn to just Buddhist philosophy. I don't know why, but there was if we're talking about an energetic plane, I was just drawn to it energetically. There was something very peaceful about it. So I started reading Buddhist texts, and I started meditating. Um, and then along this spiritual quest, I remember the movie The Secret came out, and
Mm,
the book came out, and it was very popular at the time, but it just really resonated with me, and I really started questioning, can we actually manifest our reality?
yeah.
So but me being a science guy, I wanted hardcore scientific data to see, is this real or is this just hocus pocus?
Yeah.
But a lot of the science, a lot of the quantum physicists that I was following and listening to and reading about, they were saying that's exactly how reality works. You got to change the energy internally to change the external environment. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what the Buddhist philosophy was talking about. They didn't need the science, but they were just kind of talking about it just through experience.
Yeah.
Um, so along this line, when you asked me about going into the unknown, um, what kept coming up in a lot of my books or authors that I was listening to was plant medicines.
Okay.
So I grew up in an environment where drugs are bad and you stay away from drugs. So I really
Mhm.
had a hard time going into the unknown with experimental plant medicines. But it kept coming up over and over and over again. And I said to myself, let me just have an open mind and go into this unknown.
Yeah.
And I ended up booking an 8 hour psilocybin ceremony with a trusted friend, actually
Hmm.
the person who taught me breath work.
Yeah.
And I remember the day of, and I was so scared because I was going into that unknown. I didn't know what to expect. And we're taught that drugs are bad. These are bad for us. And I thought of every excuse to cancel that ceremony, but then I,
Yeah.
I I asked myself the question, are you that scared of going into yourself? Because that's all you're
Yeah.
going to do is go deeper into yourself. And the answer was no. So I ended up doing the plant medicine ceremony, and I I do not call them drugs anymore because
Hmm.
drugs to me has a negative connotation to it. They are medicines, and I had one of the best experiences of my life. I'm like, how are these illegal? Because they give you so much insight into yourself, kind of like what we were talking about before, going back to source.
Yeah.
You dive into this spiritual kind of realm within yourself. So it was a very powerful experience. And anytime I need a really good reminder of things of how we should be internally, I'll definitely book a psilocybin ceremony. I haven't done
Mhm.
any other plants. My girlfriend has. In
Yeah.
fact, as you may or may not know, she's going back to school. She's going back to school for psychotherapy and specializing in psychedelic psychotherapy because she
Yeah.
experienced some tremendous healing from the psychedelic world. So I haven't gone there yet. Whenever I feel a calling to do it, I probably will dive into that space.
Yeah.
But until that day happens, I just kind of go with what my gut is kind of saying.
Yeah, it's definitely growing in popularity, and you definitely want to do your research in finding the right person for you
Right.
to hold the space. I have not done it yet myself, but I do the same thing's happening to me. It's showing up, just like it's showing up in this conversation right now. It keeps showing up for me
Right.
as well. I trust that when the time comes, it'll be the right time. Um, I
Right.
it's funny, like you definitely didn't jump into the kindergarten level of this. You went straight into an 8 hour journey, which I found is pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
there
like
was no there was no shortcut. That's just as
yeah.
far as the dosage that they give you, and
Yeah,
he's very thorough. Like he gives you a guidebook on what to expect, how to diet and prepare for the journey, and it's
yeah.
done in a very ceremonial, traditional type of setting that indigenous people practice on a regular basis. So yeah, there is, I mean, microdosing is huge now. A lot of
Yeah,
people, and I'm even seeing mushroom stores everywhere now. And
yeah.
I really don't know how legally they're open, but they are open. So microdosing
Hmm.
is a big thing, and there's a lot of research that shows that it can take you just into a calm kind of space.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you're ready, like I said, you'll know the calling when you're ready for the deep dive.
Yeah.
So
And the teacher will
yeah,
appear too, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
yeah, a question for you, whether it be from that specific journey or events that kind of followed from that, what would you say your biggest lesson was from that process?
I remember there was a specific moment in the ceremony where you were going through a darkish type of experience, and
Hmm.
you're trying everything in your power to get out of this dark experience.
Hmm.
And in the guidebook, he kind of prepares you for that potential experience. And I remember just sitting there and accepting this moment as it is. I wasn't labeling it as good or bad. I was just accepting the isness of this moment.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about transforming energy, in that acceptance, I transformed that dense or heavy energy that I was experiencing into love, because I was
Hmm.
in full acceptance of this moment. And when you're in full acceptance, it's almost like you're in love. And I was
Yeah.
so amazed. I was like, oh my God, I came into full acceptance, and now I love this moment, which I just
Yeah.
hated, like, a
Yeah.
few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So I guess the biggest lesson that I was learning was accepting the moment as it is. If you can learn acceptance,
Hmm.
I think your life will become a lot easier, and it's a practice. I struggle with it all the time, because things don't go, the way you want or as planned. But if you come into acceptance of it, it just takes, there's a relief that kind of comes with that acceptance.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because in the book Power versus Force, there
Mm,
is a map of consciousness in there, and it has different levels of I guess mindsets, thought processes, emotions, and things. And they
mm,
scientifically measured these things in different ways in sort of a lab setting, and were able to create a
mm.
numerical chart, right?
Right.
And from
Yeah.
0 to 1,000, anything above 200 actually is lighter.
Right.
It improves your energy, improves your health. It has a higher energy sort of like life force. I
Right.
recall acceptance being definitely over 200, but higher up in that chart. So
Higher
it's
up.
interesting you
Right.
mentioned that because I get it. Like there's situations where something goes wrong, or you're dealing with a chronic long-term thing. I always tell when again in the personal training space, we should tell clients that an injury or an illness is an opportunity for us to take a break and
Right.
and
Right.
and reassess,
Yeah.
go back inside of ourselves and ask, why am I unable to move right now? Like, why is
Right.
this
Right.
what this is not
Right.
happening to you, it's happening for you to provide
Yeah.
you with a
Yeah.
lesson,
Exactly.
right? Just like when I
Right.
when I injured myself, when I was powerlifting, like I had to stop after decades of training and
Right.
actually deal with my emotions, deal with my anger, deal with things that have come up for me over the years that I channeled into powerlifting. It channeled into moving big loads. And now that
Right.
I can't move the loads, I have to sit with them now. That's the next I like
Right.
that's I
Right.
graduated to another level where
Yeah.
now you have to
Yeah.
sit with
Yeah.
them, right? And
Right.
not distract
Right.
yourself by competition, the next meet date,
That's
and
right.
in my
Right.
identity around being a power lifter and all that stuff, right? Like I had to like and accept there was a lot of acceptance. Like I remember, wow, I just have to
Mm.
like take this and maybe there's maybe there's something I can write about with this injury that I
Right.
could share
Yeah.
people. Like there's so many different ways I kind of looked at it. And it did actually spin me on a more I was already kind of curious about the spiritual, energetic side of things, but it really
Mm.
spun me into a different,
Direction.
path, yeah, and direction,
Right.
seeking,
Hmm.
like consciously and intentionally seeking more information in that area and experiences. I didn't want to just read about it anymore. I wanted to
Right.
actually
Right.
have a visceral experience or meet
And that to me is
people
the power
aligned,
of
right?
breath work. The power
Yeah,
of breath work really takes you viscerally into that experience, right? You
yeah,
you can avoid it. And that's why, yeah, I teach it now because it's quite a powerful experience.
Yeah. So yeah, with that in mind, as of recent with your practice and with what you're doing, what you're sharing with people right now, um, what really has your attention right now with your work, like with people you're experiencing, encountering, people are coming to you, like what are you most passionate about in sharing nowadays, in your work and
I'm
in your
just
practice?
happy. It really brings me a sense of joy to see that they're getting what they need from these sessions. Like a lot of people will text me or email me after, or even talk to me after the ceremony or session, and they've never experienced something like this. And yeah, they could be dealing with heavy, dense emotions. And I'll say it from my perspective as a firefighter, RMT, and breathwork facilitator. I've never seen people more stressed out than they are today. So
Okay.
people are just dealing with a lot, and generally they don't know how to deal with that.
Hmm.
Most people will maybe go for a run or a walk, or go for a workout, which is fine. But there's a saying, wherever you go, there you are. So no
Hmm.
matter if you're going for a walk or the gym, it's that stress is always there with you. Whereas with breath work, you really feel a release. Like even me and my girlfriend, we went to one of these outdoor spas up in
Yeah.
like Barrie, and we did like the hot and cold plunges. We did salt scrubs, lying on slabs of hot heated rock. It's the same thing. We both came out of there feeling like we've just felt like so much lighter.
Yeah.
So when you're seeing your clients getting this, and when you see them having that emotional release, and if you actually analyze tears,
Hmm.
are very toxic. So it's a complete detox of the system. So it just brings me a lot of happiness and joy that people finally are getting a viable outlet to deal with the stress or trauma that they're going through.
Yeah.
And I just want to keep incorporating more and more, and that's where the sound therapy comes in. So a lot of I have anti-Himalayan singing bowls, and now we have the science to show that takes you into a brainwave state. It entrains the brain, the gong as well. I just want to keep adding more and more of these authentic instruments that
Yeah.
have a healing effect on, the mind, body, and emotional state. So that's where I really want to just keep evolving, and do the best I can to deliver a product that people are getting a lot of results from.
Yeah, I think part of it too is you're basic I found this when I was doing Reiki and having to sort of explain what it was to people. And it's like I explain it as it's almost like you come in and you're in a certain way at the time,
Mm,
especially when you come in. And I usually ask the question, what has your attention these days that you want to put good energy towards or that you want to
right,
clear? And then we
right.
kind of like talk about it a little bit sometimes, and almost like stirring up the intention and the idea of it. And then when the session's over, it's like an IT expert come getting on your computer and just defragging everything and clearing everything, and then just giving you the
Yeah,
tool back, giving it back to you,
yeah,
saying now it's ready to work for you. Now you
right,
do the
right.
work, right? I find, what people might be struggling with at the time is they know they have to do something, they're not doing it for whatever reason, they feel afraid or whatever.
Mm,
um,
mm.
and it spins us into, I talk a lot about this, amongst my people, is there's no shortage of opportunity to get addicted to something, to get
Oh,
addicted
for
to
sure.
social
Nowadays.
media, sugar,
Yeah.
um, shows on Netflix, like binge watching shows. It's just distractions, right? I often sometimes ask people the question of what if TV didn't exist? What if we didn't have TVs in the house? Like a TV is like
So,
another family member, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. And I've had this conversation with a good friend of mine who's a psychologist, and And even Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this as well. With regards to addiction, how do we know that we should be doing one thing, but we're doing another? H- How do we get the person to be doing the right thing? And it's a sense of discipline or will. And I had this conversation with that friend of mine who's a psychologist. Where does that will come from? Some
Mhm.
people like myself are born with this will to, okay, this is my goal, I'm gonna stick to it. I have a sense of discipline or will. Other people don't. And that's not to say that I'm always disciplined. I have some bad habits that are hard to shake, but that's the important question. Where does this will come from?
Yeah.
Some people have it, some people don't. And I don't know if it's a skill that you can develop over time. Um, but yeah, maybe it's just an interest level. Maybe this particular thing doesn't really interest you enough. It's an important question. Where does will come from?
Yeah,
Right.
as
So,
you're writing that, I was like, it was just coming up to me right now is like almost like there's a process that starts with, let's say, avoidance, right? Like, and like you
mhm,
mentioned in your journey, that that hesitation or that feeling you had, the darkness is coming, and like we could easily be in an avoidance, right? In your situation, you had to step into it because you'd committed 8 hours of your life to the
right.
session, but
And there's no avoiding
yeah.
it. There's nowhere to
Yeah,
go. Like
there's no
it's
way
in your
around.
face,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you
totally.
you can't escape it, right?
Yeah, and in everyday life, we could avoid for decades. We could avoid for a long time. And as you say, like we avoid until something hurts enough or is annoying enough or frustrating enough to create
Right.
self-awareness. So avoidance,
Right.
then
Right.
awareness. Then when we're aware that we have the opportunity after awareness to make a decision, right? And like you said,
Right.
the decision could be to accept, right? And step into the jungle. And then it leads
Right.
you back. It leads you back to love. It leads you back to yourself, back to source, back to your authentic
Right.
way of being, right? It's interesting how all that just kind of came up from what you were sharing in our conversation, which is really cool, right? Like,
Yeah, and even Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it. In the unknown, that's where all possibilities exist. So
yeah.
there's the possibility of love as opposed to hate, or there's the possibility of growth instead of struggle.
Mhm.
So the unknown has a lot of potential. So it's a beautiful space to actually go in there because there's unlimited potential in that space.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to the listeners, I think you should dive into that unknown space because there's unlimited potential in that space for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what you talked about? Go ahead.
I was thinking too, like there's this old movie. I might have mentioned this in another podcast. There's a movie. I think Brendan Fraser was the main actor in it, where um, he's like signing a deal with the devil or something,
Okay.
and she's always screwing with him. Like he'll make a wish and then she'll grant the wish, but she'll fuck around with something to make it not
Right.
exactly what he wants. And at the end of the movie, not the spoiler alert was that God and the devil were actually collaborating. So like
Right.
the
Right.
darkness, the
Right.
devil, whatever you want to call it, is actually its job
One
is
and the
to,
same.
yeah, make you so uncomfortable that eventually you make a
Right.
decision to go back to love, right?
Right. And you know
And
what? I experienced that exact same thing with massage therapy.
yeah,
People wait till the absolute worst when they have a low back or they can't turn their neck to come in
mhm,
onto the table to get work done. They're waiting for the worst case scenario. They're waiting for rock bottom. And I try to teach them, don't wait for the worst case scenario to come see me. Come on a regular basis, like
yeah,
once a month, every 2 weeks, like get it into a routine. And even with my breath work, as I mentioned, people are in the most stressful states they've ever been. And the minute they walk out of the breathwork ceremony or session and into the real world, we're just bombarded by so much. So it can really take you out of balance. So it's almost a habitual thing that you have to start incorporating into your life. It's on a regular basis, just to recalibrate yourself back to balance, back to homeostasis. And we shouldn't be waiting for the worst case scenario in our life to
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be doing that,
It's like
right?
basically you're just going into debt and you have more to climb out of if you don't manage it, right? Like when I was actually seeing you, I was booking
Hmm.
90-minute full body
Yeah,
once a month
right,
in advance because I thought, let me try this. You're right here in the club. It's not like it's
right.
inconvenient, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
there's like a
yeah,
staff discount, there's benefits, there's all these different things. Like, why am I not
yeah,
taking advantage of this? And
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and that was also when I was still competing at the time, and that was also when I was actually performing at my best because I was just
right.
I found whenever I saw a treatment specialist, whether it be massage, chiro, somebody, osteo, on a
Hmm.
regular enough basis, they're likely to catch or predict the future, and help me avoid something like an injury or something
Yeah,
down the road by just
yeah,
saying I'm
absolutely.
sensing something in your tissue, in your shoulder
Right.
that
Yeah,
continue looking after it and hydrating and doing whatever, and maybe give me some advice and tips and things that I can do. But they're likely to catch it before
yeah,
I
absolutely.
before it happens, right? And when I got hurt that one time, I was I was what was the word for it? I was ignoring the signals.
Right,
Like I
right.
was
Most people
so
do.
yeah, I was so fixated on it felt very ego driven at the time. I was so fixated on
Mm,
an outcome and forcing it to happen that
right.
it took me 3 weeks to blow myself up, right?
Now, you know what? On that topic, I've been in the same boat where I'm forcing things to happen, and I think of it like this: it's like swimming upstream. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
You'll get to the destination if you're strong enough and going
Hmm.
against that stream, but you can go downstream. You can just go with the flow of things instead of
Yeah.
forcing it, right? You don't have to work so hard sometimes. And that sometimes is a struggle for me to just, okay, let the river take me where I need to go instead of swimming upstream because it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I might get to my destination, but I'm tired by the time I get there. So that's another disciplined practice that I try to incorporate is just let the stream take me where I need to go.
Yeah, so going when I picture like swimming upstream, it's almost like trying to hang on to the past
Yeah,
because
yeah,
the
yeah.
water is coming from the past and it's the future, and you're just like you're afraid of it, so you keep swimming.
And you know what? When you say that, Brian, that's another thing that I experienced with in the plant medicine ceremony is that it's called an ego death. You're holding on to things that no longer serve you, but you identify with it. So it's you don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
You don't want to let it go because you identify with this. So it's
Hmm.
it's a struggle to let this go because it almost feels like a death. But on the
Yeah.
other side of that is the better version of you, right?
Yeah.
So
Ego death,
it can be
man.
really scary at
Yeah.
times, but
Yeah.
it's probably the biggest one of the biggest moments of your life.
Yeah. When I went through this, I still don't particularly love rides, at amusement
Hmm.
parks, but I did, take this on a while back, and I got on some big rides before, and I realized, wow, like probably the worst part of the roller coaster is lining up and
Right.
that hill at the
Yeah.
beginning. It's not
Yeah.
even when you're going down, it's the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah. 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 It's the
And then
anticipation.
that
Yeah.
little curve at the top, and then it drops, and
Yeah.
you only have to be
Yeah.
brave for about a second and a
That that
half.
that
Because
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then
That's
you
a
get
good
the
analogy.
benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you get the benefit
Right.
of the loops and all the other cool things that
Right.
happen that are actually not that
Right.
scary. They're pretty fun. And then you
Yeah.
slide in at when it ends, and you're like, you got this ear to ear smile, and you're like, holy shit,
Right.
like, you know,
Yeah.
but all that like
Yeah.
years avoiding like Canada's Wonderland because of that feeling, right? It's funny.
And
Um,
it's like carrying this rock, and you finally have
yeah,
dropped this rock, and you're like, wow, what a relief, right?
yeah, you're not giving your
And
power up to it,
again,
you know?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is great. You know, keeping track of the time here and having
Hmm.
to close this out in a great way. I love the conversation. I look forward to
Sure.
more of this. One thing I'd like to spin over to you is and I like to do this for the listeners is to give the guest an opportunity to speak directly to whoever's listening right now.
Mm.
And how I would present that to you is um within this topic that we're talking about, whether it be authentic living, living your true self, this type of thing that we're talking about, what would be three insights, actions, or ideas that that just come to you right now that you could share directly with the audience? Like speak directly to the person listening right now. What comes up for you?
I just have an open mind. I think that's really key. You can find a lot of insight, or you might be surprised if you have an open mind to try something new.
Mhm.
Get out of your comfort zone. We we talked a little bit about acceptance. Practice
Mhm.
acceptance. Just be with the moment as it is. Try not to label things as good or bad, just as an
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
Um, and really kind of just listening to that inner wisdom, listening to yourself. Does something feel right or wrong? And like a lot of the people that I learned these modalities from, um, they just had an authentic presence to them. There was no, you're going to see it a lot in this new age wellness field. There's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of, I don't want to say, I don't know if fakeness is the right
Mhm.
word, um, but they just don't seem authentic to me. It seems they're more about selling a product than the authentic experience.
Yeah.
And so just trust your inner guidance system. The people that I think I learned from, they weren't all about the glitz and glam or the show. They were really about the authentic experience. And so just tuning into the heart space,
Mhm.
what feels right to you. I think you came to see me for a certain reason. Something felt authentic, something felt right. And that's
Yeah.
what a lot of people that have come to my breathworks or massage therapy, they get this authentic vibe. And it's the biggest compliment I think I receive, is that they think I'm this authentic person that's not trying to sell them a product, but to really help them in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all comes down to like how you practice in your own personal world and how you show up and even as practitioners or coaches or therapists, we go through our own professional journey of at first it's like, I need a job or I need a way to kind of
Right.
like a livelihood,
Live.
right? But
Yeah.
also as
Yeah.
you sort of really get into the craft and the art of it, there's so much more that you're actually receiving other than like monetary acknowledgement. And also too, I found the more I had evolved, the more opportunity I had to work with newer, more unique situations. Whether it be
Hmm.
someone in a fighting cancer or
Mm.
maybe it's a 14-year-old and I've been working with adults the whole time and also I'm working with kids or all these different things happen, I believe, when you are evolving also to other levels and now have the reference points to be able to be of service, right? So
And that's
um
what I was just going to say. It's acts of service, and
yeah,
you start really feeling a sense of joy or happiness from serving others.
yeah,
And I for a long time that didn't I didn't want to acknowledge that, but
yeah,
now I really start feeling happy when people are getting like a great experience from whatever I'm offering. So
Yeah.
I can totally relate to what you're saying now. Yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. I have one more question for you, but before we get into that
sure.
question, I just want to get a
Mm.
feel for anyone who's interested in contacting you or learning more about you. What are you working on right now? Like, what is any projects or anything that you're working on right now that you can share? And how can people contact you or find you?
I'm just right now, I'm just really expanding my whole breathwork ceremonies that I'm hosting in my home. I
Mhm,
host them generally once a month.
mhm,
If the demand starts picking up, I'll definitely host them twice a month. So that's kind of what I'm just evolving and working with now, trying to give people a really good experience from breathwork and sound and a healing type of experience. Any way I can evolve on that, that's what I'm
mhm,
really kind of focused in on. People
mhm.
can contact me through, I primarily post through Instagram or social media, Facebook. My handle is my last name, one. So Tsirakidis one, and you can contact me through email as well. So I don't know if you post any of that stuff when this
Yeah, I will.
podcast gets
Yeah.
released. You can definitely add my email or my Instagram link, and that's pretty much it, Brian.
Yeah, and I think to encourage anyone else, if you're curious, it starts with a conversation, right? I
Yeah,
think
yeah, for
if they
sure.
if they're curious about anything that you're sharing, um,
Yeah,
just have a conversation with Mike first, if to see if
right,
there's a vibe or a feeling there, right? That's how I pursued
right,
new people as well, is just like reaching out to them, right? So
right,
that's
right.
good. So
Awesome.
final question is,
Sure.
what does the awakened body mean to you?
The awakened body is kind of what we've been talking about, the whole mind, body, and spirit, awakening a totality of what is in the body, your soul, your spirit, the mind. To me, it's illuminating the body and everything that encompasses it.
Yeah, and I like that. And I think if you were to, how I would maybe describe the feeling of awakened body is the feeling just towards the end of one of your breathwork ceremonies,
Yeah, yeah.
where
You
like,
do feel
yeah,
illuminated. So if
uh,
that's the experience that that's the awakened body that I want to try and give
yeah, that's
people.
that
Yeah.
is actually the awakened body experience. I remember the first time too going, why is my body tingling like this? Like there was like,
Yeah,
and it was
yeah,
coming,
and
it,
you
it was
feel
coming
it,
through the heart chakra, I almost like the heart space
right?
and into my hands, and it was going on for almost the entire time. But like it felt
You
like
feel
pins
like a
and
sun
yeah, yeah, it felt like
and
pins
all
and
these
needles,
rays
but
just coming out of the body.
yeah, it felt like pins and needles, but I wasn't lying incorrectly or anything. It was just something like got released, like was opening and releasing and flowing through my
Right,
body. And that was that awakened
right.
body experience. So thank you
There
for
you
that.
go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome back
Awesome.
anytime, Brian.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I definitely will be back, and thanks again for the chat today. I look forward to more of your content, your photography, and what you have to
awesome.
share out in social media. And I definitely look forward to our next breathwork session.
Okay, Brian. Well, thanks for
Thanks a
having
lot.
me. I really enjoyed doing this. This is rare for me to do, so I really I enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome, and I look forward to sharing this with others. So thank you
Awesome.
again. Take care.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, take care.